This is Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of Africa Freedom Network, The Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoin Bo Herbert, and I bring revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on Ground Zero and across the globe. It was another week of brave, heartwarming show of courage by Ambazonians on Ground Zero, despite the sad news of more targeted killings, assassinations, massacres, enforced disappearances, rape, and maiming by colonial forces of La République du Cameroun. Here is Ambazonia Calling's Innocent Chair with the first part of the news wrap-up from the homeland.
Ambazonian leaders are unanimous in their rejection and condemnation of the proposed 13 billion CFA emergency humanitarian package announced Wednesday, June 20th by the colonial Prime Minister of Cameroon, Philemon Yang. Observers say it is no coincidence that the fundraiser is coming barely 10 days after the signing of a £1.5 billion deal with the London-based energy company New Age Limited. Speaking on RFE, Cho Ayaba of the Ambazonia Governing Council had this to say.
It's a laughable plan. The government's plan is characteristic of Cameroon's socio-political outlook. It invades, it shatters communities, deprives them of their livelihood, burn down their means of survival, chase them out of their homes, and then throw a bone and hope that, like hungry dogs, they will fight over it for their own survival. Cameroon is bankrupt. It hasn't got the monies to prosecute the brutal campaign within Ambazonia. It is faced with international isolation, and it is playing both the arsonist and the firefighter. The Ambazonian people have rejected these overtures. The African Commission on Human and People Rights in the Ngumne versus Cameroon case has said the root causes of the crisis, which is Cameroon's occupation of Ambazonia, must be addressed. Different international organizations, governments have told Cameroon you have to address the root causes of this crisis. All of these fantasies will not solve the Ambazonian problem. We don't need handouts from Cameroon. They should get out of our land. Our people will return to their villages and their cities and rebuild their lives.
Cameroon's colonial capital, Yaoundé, has published a list of names it accuses of masterminding, funding, and inciting violence in Ambazonia. The list has become more famous for the names that are not on it than the names on it. Many see it as another attempt to fragment leadership akin to the Northwest-Southwest divide-and-conquer politics of La République du Cameroun. For most of the week, Ambazonia restoration forces blocked the highway between Ekona and Kumba. According to intel sources, the roadblocks are designed to curb the cowardly massacres of vulnerable populations, the rape, torture, random shooting with the sole purpose of destroying homes and property, and burning down of entire villages by colonial genocidal forces of Paul Biya.
That boy, the bit the boy with the plane I pray. It like say, even per 1 hour start, there is still making an advertisement for this struggle.
Yaoundé has also cautioned its paramilitary officers to steal as long as they are not caught. It is the essence of a communique from the Ministry of Defense in which authorities are calling on their rogue forces not to use their cell phones or distribute material containing their genocidal acts. Meantime, videos have surfaced with Amba restoration forces reassuring communities that they are there to defend the communities with their lives if need be.
My woman, don't you worry. My child, don't you worry. If I happens to die as an Amazonia, don't you worry, we shall meet again. Snap us. Where they?
Leaders of the Ambazonia Recognition and Collaborative Council, ARC for short, have elected Catherine Formangum as the new chairperson of the organization. Finally, a charity fundraiser gala to support Ambazonian refugees in Nigeria was successfully held beginning last evening and into the wee hours this morning in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, home of the Green Bay Packers. Innocent Chia, Ambazonia Calling.
Those are war chants from a new group of Amba fighters. The group rolled into the capital of Ambazonia's northern zone on Thursday night to the rumble of gunfire in the Old Town and Hospital roundabout neighborhoods. Police claimed that they were on night patrol when they were ambushed. The skirmishes led to 2 persons, reportedly Amba fighters, being killed, including Michael Wolani, the young nephew of Julia Gam, who was shot and killed Friday evening along with a taxi driver at Mile 4 Nkwen, reportedly on suspicion of being Amba fighters. The young men had gone out to play soccer earlier in the day, according to Julia Gam, who honored this young graduate of St. Paul College, Bamenda, with a brave posting on WhatsApp, shaming her murderers.
Hello, everybody. This is a quick message to all those mothers out there who go out killing the Anglophones in Cameroon. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. It is hard, and it's just even harder when you know that your own get killed just because it went out to play football. It is so hard. It's just hard to take in. You have a child just growing up, basically trying to have a future, and he gets snatched by the bullet by French people, the government of La République, and they don't care. You go out there and you're blaming people for self-defense every day. You're blaming them for defending themselves. What did that boy do to you? What did he do? He went out to play football. That's all he did. And then you shot the taxi driver and him. So don't they deserve a life? Don't they deserve it? I'm done with anything that has to do with the French Cameroon government. And I'll fight my best to make sure that the Anglophones don't suffer again. You don't take our people like that. You don't take them like that. It is just horrible. You don't know what the pain of death is like.
Completely unprovoked, according to eyewitnesses, colonial forces opened fire into crowds of fleeing Ambazonians in the town of Munya in the outskirts of Boya, capital of Ambazonia, on Friday night and Saturday morning. A Thursday morning attack on a road checkpoint mounted by colonial forces near the Big Mop market at Ombe in the southern zone led to the death of an adjutant of the gendarmerie, Robinson Ngachu Nganku. He was killed along 2 of his colleagues. The slain gendarme's wedding to Sandrine Joseline Ngawa was due to hold next June 30th at the Christ the King Parish in Chinga, Yaoundé. In Akona, colonial forces using armored personal carriers and bulldozers managed briefly to clear barricades that had been imposed as a roadblock between Boya and Kumba. They came in a hail of bullets, firing indiscriminately into homes, business premises, and targeting any civilians within view. The United States Consular Service have denied visas to Cameroon's feminine military football team, which was supposed to be traveling to Texas to participate in the 2018 Female Military World Cup. The denial is believed to be part of an unadvertised travel ban and freezing of assets targeting the Biya regime.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Katamenta. We have a winner for the Nyamfuka of the Week. And we are not done until we have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling. South Africa will serve on the United Nations Security Council for another 2 years, beginning the 1st of January 2019. It is hard to know what, if anything, the Security Council can do for Ambazonia, given the presence of France with veto power in that council. As everyone knows, France is the official sponsor of colonial Cameroon in their joint annexationist policy in Ambazonia. We ask Ambazonia Calling's Barrister Siambe to opine on this matter.
Everything that is wrong with Ambazonia today can be fixed by the United Nations. Yet, we know that it is not just because the United Nations has powers to solve the problem that it means it will do it. The UN General Assembly, for example, could re-examine resolutions pertaining to Ambazonia's independence and demand strict implementation of same. The UN Security Council, with primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, can call the Biya regime to order. It could demand that parties to the conflict in the Cameroons settle by peaceful means. And it can sanction parties to the conflict just as it can authorize the use of force to maintain or restore international peace. South Africa will join the most powerful instrument of the United Nations, its Security Council. Never in mankind's history has an organization with so much power to do good stood idly by while millions of men, women, and children are murdered in violent conflict, as has the United Nations. And South Africa knows this better than most countries, which is why we at Ambazonia Calling hope that Pretoria will use its membership of the Security Council to return the favor so many African countries did to it while it was under apartheid misrule. There is a striking resemblance between how the United Nations ignored the apartheid problem in South Africa and how they have ignored the Ambazonia problem. Apartheid was first reported to the United Nations as an evil system of government by India in 1946. It took 54 years for Nelson Mandela to walk out free from prison in 1990. Over those years, several members of the UN Security Council, led by Britain, the United States, and France, shamelessly diabolized Mandela and the ANC as terrorists. A bloc of Western countries sided with the apartheid regime, as they do now with the Biya regime, claiming that apartheid fell within the internal affairs of South Africa. Even when the West pretended to recognize the evil that apartheid was, they did not want to intervene. Instead, they called upon the government perpetrating the evil to introduce measures to bring about what they called racial harmony. The Cold War aiding, even countries that knew better aligned in support of the evil. They looked away, hoping that the problem would go away, as many today hope that the Ambazonia problem will go away. Worldview on apartheid changed drastically in the 1960s, notably after the Sharpeville massacre of 1968. We at Ambazonia Calling believe that the Menka massacre should be such a moment for the world on the Ambazonia problem. South Africa does not have to invent anything. UN history points to the action Pretoria can and should take. Following the Sharpeville massacre on 21st March 1960, the UN Security Council took its first action against the apartheid regime under Resolution 134, calling on apartheid South Africa to abandon its policies of apartheid and racial discrimination. A few years later, in August 1963, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution imposing an arms embargo on South Africa, which sadly did not become mandatory until November 1977. It is the Security Council that voted on 2nd December 1968 to isolate South Africa, requesting all states and organizations to suspend cultural, educational, sporting, and other exchanges with the racist regime. We know that Ambazonians have little to no faith in the United Nations. In fact, I can see many of you, listeners of Ambazonia Calling, rolling your eyes as you listen to our call on South Africa to use the same script against Biya's colonial regime as was used against the apartheid regime. Only few African countries can hold their own against some of the demonic, manipulative, blood-sucking, cannot be trusted members of the Security Council. If only one African country can, it is South Africa. The challenge is Herculean. Once freedom is loved by many around the world, but hated by just one of the 5 veto powers of the UN, the Security Council becomes a place where the hope of the less privileged goes to die. South Africa can change that by using its membership of the Security Council to galvanize African and worldwide support in resolving Africa's most vexing problems. C. Ajingo Ambe, reporting for Ambazonia Calling.
Coming up next week, and this is very important for all Ambazonians based in the United States, notably those of you based in the Washington, D.C. metro area, the Subcommittee on Africa of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the U.S. Congress will be hosting a hearing on the Cameroons on Wednesday, the 27th of June 2018. The address to the hearing is 45 Independence Street, that is in Washington, D.C. The nearest metro station is Union Station. Come one and all.
For more stories from around the world, go to the World Wide Web at themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
It is my pleasure to welcome on the phone Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta, our guest for the Devil Unmasked, the Truth Out segment. Professor Tatamenta, please allow me to start this segment off with a question. And please, we trust you to take no prisoners. How would you describe the empire that the tyrant Biya is building and running?
What we know is that in Biya's kingdom, it is a society where reality is stranger than fiction. And it is just part of the broth we've gone through for the past 50-something years.
How do you describe this kind of politicians, if they qualify to be called politicians?
Well, to me, they are political hacks and quacks, not politicians as people we know them, who are supposed to play leadership roles. They're just a bunch of gangsters all over the whole place. And that is why we are living this epitome of confusion.
I just saw some very disturbing video of troops going down streets and opening fire like they were in the middle of the Second World War. Or would it be the Third World War? Have you seen the video? What do you say about it?
I have seen it, and it is not very strange to me because it is just part or just a little bit of the venerable nightmare for all of us Ambazonians that we have lived through for the past 50 years and over. This forced servitude, whether somebody is in the Biya gang regime or is outside as an Ambazonian, it is a nightmare.
Amnesty International took some time in their report to talk about torture. It was reporting it as if it is some exception.
Torture in Cameroon is state policy. It was institutionalized in those days when they were fighting against the so-called Maquisards, in reality nationalists. And then with the so-called independence, it became part and parcel of the political pie. So you find that there is a state of emergency which was declared in 1962 in April, renewable after every 6 months. And many people do not even know about this. And it authorizes torture as state policy. Up till today, it's still there. It's not rescinded.
Many people listening to us in the West would believe that this is something a people can solve through political processes, such as an election. What do you tell people who believe in an election resolving this kind of problems?
Election is normally a choice. In Cameroon, it has hardly been a choice. What they do is that they mask something else, theft, and then they call it in the election and sell it to the international community. And this they have been doing for over the years. Look at even a referendum. They say say yes or we. Yes is the same thing as we, which means that you are not left with a choice. So the international community has been fooled with this for a very long time. And I think it is time for the international community to understand that this fascist history of the Biya gangsterism can no longer continue to fool the international community.
One place where this government is going, and we know it is bankrupt, is to go to the bank and go to every donor seeking loans to do whatever they need to do.
From all indications, it is clear that this is a government that does not even respect itself. They borrow money from the International Monetary Fund, and they carry the money immediately to an Intercontinental Hotel in Switzerland. They cannot build hospitals. They instead destroy, and now they are destroying the hospitals and destroying schools or burning them down and burning human beings alive. When they are given such money, is it for the buying of arms for killing more people and burning more schools, burning human beings in their sleep, or it is for constructing anything? So those so-called donors should start staging a rethink, because this is not a government that knows anything about economic development. All they know is survival in power.
Wasn't it remarkable to hear the Prime Minister go out and give a death toll, give numbers on what destruction has happened, and absolutely not have a word to say about Ambazonians who have been killed or property that has been destroyed in Ambazonia? You believe the regime is still there, or they have packed out and we are on our own now?
Well, it is understandable that he couldn't have said anything different, because as a house Negro, what do you expect? What do you expect him to say? It is difficult for him to say anything. It is not that he is ignorant of what is going on. He knows what is actually going on. He has reports coming in on a daily basis. But what he is doing as how do you call it, a chattel slave, he cannot come out and say exactly what he is seeing, the hard facts he has in hand. So there is no pretension that La République du Cameroun, because of a look of silence, can ever be made to change its damaged soul, if it has any soul. It has no soul. So we have to fight it to the bitter end to make sure that we clear the snakes out of our mouth. We have to survive and develop as human beings.
When you say to the bitter end, can you define that bitter end for Ambazonians who are listening? And that will be my last question.
We have to keep the trotting movement for the restoration of the statehood and sovereign independence of Ambazonia. Whether anybody wants it or not, it is our God-given right.
Thank you very much, Prof.
My pleasure.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
There was a time in the liberation struggle when it was said that the pen is mightier than the sword. Fast forward to Twitter generation, and it has to be said that social media has probably become mightier than the AK-47. Ambazonia Calling's Jude Ozugen examines the key role social media has played and continues to play in the live free or die Ambazonia struggle.
One of the most active battlegrounds for the liberation of Ambazonia is on social media. Facebook, WhatsApp, and Twitter lead the way. The proof that it is working is evident in the numerous attempts to silence the internet and the scathing contempt in which the colonial regime of Cameroon holds social media. In 2015, the octogenarian president of colonial Cameroon, Paul Biya, condemned his online critics, calling them irresponsible prophets, birds of ill omen, dreamers and enthusiasts of virtual cause for destabilization through the social networks. Critics did not let off, and it came as no surprise when phone and internet services were shut down for 93 days across Ambazonia in 2017. The more the colonial regimes hate social media, the more Ambazonia love it and have used it to energize the restoration quest. Drawing inspiration from the viral picture of Mohamed Bouazizi in flames after he immolated himself as an act of protest against the Tunisian regime, Ambazonians have shot and disseminated video clips depicting gruesome images of war crimes, atrocity crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocidal violence. Viewed several million times, these images have catapulted Ambazonia from relative obscurity to the center of international media frenzy. Social media has helped establish heterogeneous coalition across socioeconomic and political lines, reaching a global audience. The mismanagement of calls for economic and political equity, the failure to offer genuine solutions to trade union dispute tabled by teachers and lawyers jolted Ambazonians at home and abroad out of 5 decades of political slumbers, crystallizing in magic moments of communion on September 22nd and October 1st, 2017. A WhatsApp army of activists based abroad helped mobilize not only an unprecedented diplomatic offensive, but also ghost town operations in the homeland. The SCNC WhatsApp group in the United States emerged in November 2016 as a fundraising tool. It is on it that pledges were made and support provided in dollars to the budding revolution at the time. Critics mock those they perceive as Internet General, but tools like GoFundMe have achieved for the Ambazonia revolution what traditional banks can only dream of. Social media shattered the regime's monopoly on information and propaganda. Short video clips and voice messages set the stage for the coming of networks like SCBC and, in the near future, African Freedom Network. At last, inspiring stories of protests totally ignored by CRTV can be told and citizens can be mobilized. Images of female students of University of Boya entrapped in filthy water from septic tank stimulated genuine disdain for the regime and united a traumatized people, fired their collective imagination and mobilized Ambazonians into action. Censorship has not only come from the Bias regime. A few administrators have young members from WhatsApp groups for expressing views they did not like. Hate speech has been given a new list on some fora. Surrogate for one side in the struggle have made their case as if none other matters. Despite these dangers, and there are many, it is primitive to be shutting the internet off in this day and age, and it is outright stupid to young people from social media platforms simply because they do not subscribe to your political predilection. Jude Agua Ozogen from Ambazonia Calling.
Many were considered this week for the crown of Nyamfuka of the week, but in the end, there can only be one winner and 2 runners-up. This is Ambazonia Calling's Lambert Mbom.
Cameroon State Defense Secretary in charge of the Gendarmerie, Yves Landry Etoga, worked extremely hard this week to earn this crown, but still came up short for the orders he issued, commanding all gendarmes to quit all social media platforms, notably Facebook and WhatsApp, and to stop using their smartphones to film atrocities. Etoga is selling after the market when he tries to prevent his soldiers from filming and broadcasting the regime's war crimes and crimes against humanity after the soldiers have already done so. Mr. Etoga's note threatens severe sanctions, not for any soldier who commits crimes. No, not at all. The note promises punishment for only those soldiers who film the crimes they are committing and post the shocking images on the World Wide Web. Mr. Etoga tried hard, as I said, but he did not win the crown. Then there was the colonial governor for the Southern Zone, Bernard Okalia Bilai. This is the fellow who called Ambazonians dogs, remember? This is the same fellow who this week decided to engage those he called dogs. He invited Ambazonians to come out of the bushes and forests where they have been hiding from the colonialists who burnt down their homes and villages. On CRTV, Okala Bilai sounded like he wanted to cut a remix of Who Let the Dogs Out, as he offered to play dog catcher for the evil regime he serves. He urged all displaced persons, what am I saying? All the dogs that have fled their villages to return to their villages. They should not listen to or be frightened by those Okala Bilai and the regime called terrorists. Security forces, he said, are here to guarantee the safety of the people. Anyone in Ambazonia who still thinks the real dogs of war the regime has deployed in Ambaland are there to protect them saw proof of just how much insecurity they bring with them when they raided several times this week. Bernard Okalabilai did well, but not well enough to win the crown. Professor Elvis Ngole Ngole, boy oh boy, this fellow showed how it is done. He demonstrated how you win the crown hands down, going to the extent of annoying young men in his native Kupe Maninguba who banished him from his home. Political prostitution has a way of frying the brains of those who get entangled in it, and Professor Ngole Ngole delivered proof of it this week, stammering incoherently through a 5-minute video aired on STV. Here is how Professor Ngole Ngole's message was summarized. From a political standpoint, the president has manifested his conscience, his Republican conscience of his republicanism, because from a political standpoint, politically speaking, the fellow citizens of the Northwest and Southwest have a political standpoint of conscience of national unity because we are one. Congratulations, Professor Ngole Ngole. You are so brilliant in your stupidity that you are the winner of this week's Dishonorable Award, the Nyamfuka of the Week.
Combing through social media this week, we stumbled on an excellent open letter to the colonial president of the Republic of Cameroon, Mr. Paul Biya. This is Ambazonia Calling's Trissa Cunningham, with excerpts of the letter written and signed by a certain Acha, who provides only E as the initial of his or her first name.
Sir, people complained about their conditions and the challenges they faced in a union they thought they were a part of. You ignored them. They organized themselves and presented the problems in a formal and civilized manner. You assaulted and arrested them in a colonial style, banned their consortium, and refused them any platform on which to talk or express their grievances, not even in the supposed parliament where they have their representatives. They ignored your unjust laws and called on all to boycott, triggering a civil disobedience. You opened the gates of your military barracks, letting out your wild, untamed dogs to descend upon them, arresting, killing indiscriminately, raping young girls, and destroying their livelihood. The helpless young men opted and stood up to defend their sisters, mothers, and their communities. You hurriedly declared a war from an airport tarmac, without a clue of how to fight or win the war. The world advised you to dialogue. You ignored and snobbed at such advice, declaring that the form of the state is non-negotiable and will never dialogue with those you and your ministers call terrorists. You pushed harder with your war adventure, thinking it was going to be a quick win in a matter of weeks. Weeks turned into months, months to a year now, as we keep counting. The war and weaponry used gets more and more sophisticated. Your frustrated military turned to the civilian communities for massacres in revenge of their losses, forcing entire communities into the forest and many more across the border in search of shelter. You intensified your assault, killing more, destroying businesses, banning and burning motorbikes, an industry that employed hundreds of thousands of the youth you had abandoned on the streets to fend for themselves. We warned you and told you your forces do not have the monopoly of using firepower when a people are faced with an existential threat, and that your actions are radicalizing the youth. You ignored as usual. Many of the helpless and now unemployed youth turned to self-defense, inflicting untold losses on your forces. In desperation, you turned to innocent communities, massacring and destroying in revenge. We increased the loudness of our voices calling for dialogue, yet you ignored. Pushing harder with your military offensive, deploying a full scorched earth policy in order to intimidate the population and force them into submission, and subsequently turn against the fighters. The population resisted your pain and moved further into the forest. The international community raised an alert and points out your gross human rights abuses, accusing you of crimes against humanity. The UN declared a humanitarian crisis and suggested the need to protect the population, as your government has failed to do so. You panic and react irrationally, making more errors while refusing to dialogue. More and more armed groups keep emerging at every twist you make. With the groups multiplying daily and the sound of gunfire getting louder and louder, you have now announced a pseudo-Marshall Plan to reconstruct the lives you have and continue to destroy. You declared a war, then announced a humanitarian and reconstruction plan without declaring the end of the war, or at least calling for a ceasefire. My question to you is, will the humanitarian reconstruction plan be implemented while bullets are flying overheads? The people no longer trust you and your government. You've lost all credibility in the eyes of the people. Who do you intend to spend the money on? Are you thinking of buying consciences and expanding your informants' networks a la Cameroonese style? Think again. Or how do you really intend to spend the 12 billion CFA when the affected communities are now a ghost of what they used to be, with every nook and cranny deserted? Knowing your elections are around the corner, and also knowing those who manage your 12 billion Marshall Plan fund are the same colonial officers and your campaign ministers, as well as resource persons. Where will the separation line between the humanitarian funds and your campaign funds be drawn? Was the announcement quickly made to deter and circumvent the full involvement of the UN, whose humanitarian rights organization has been prevented from stepping foot onto the conflict zone ever since the crisis started? Mr. President, you can fool the world as long as you wish to, but the conflict will remain for as long as the root causes are not addressed. Changing signboards across the regions from French to English, asking ministers and colonial officers to speak more English, or eating achu on TV cameras will not resolve this problem. No amount of gunfire will do either. So pull your head out of the sand, step aside and give way to those with the will and ability to do what is right while there is still some time left. If at all there is still some time left. Allow third parties to mediate, as you and your government no longer have the sole authority to bring this matter to a peaceful end. All parties involved in this conflict will have to be on the table. It will not be selective, and it will not be you to decide who has a seat on the table. I hope you read and understand my letter without its content and intent getting lost in translation. You messed up big time, Mr. President, and it shall never be the same again. You pushed the people to rise, the people have risen, and never to fall again.
In this day and age of restoration of independence, it is the political equivalent of having a hair in the soup to hear any Ambazonian leader still preaching or advocating federalism. Barrister Manjong Judambe reminds Ambazonians that what they hear from some of our leaders based on Ground Zero may be nothing but a code. Here is his report.
Consortium leader Barrister Felix Agbonkongo warned of a moment when Colonial Yaoundé would be offering and begging Ambazonians to accept federalism and no one would be giving it any consideration. Agbonkongo's prophecy, like others from Honorable Joseph Weber, has come to pass. It was advocacy for federation that led the colonial regime of Mr. Beer to ban the consortium, label its leaders terrorists, abduct, deport, detain, torture and charge them with rebellion, secession and gun running. Rejecting federalism and demonizing those advocating it quickly transformed what was a mere spark into a wild bushfire, seeking total restoration of the independence of the former British Southern Cameroons. Ambazonians in the diaspora, at safe distance from the barbaric Biya regime, can provide full-throated voice to calls for independence. Comrades living in the mouth of the lion are unable to do the same without risking long prison sentences or death at the hands of the colonialists. Seen as heroes, and rightly so, the likes of Agbonkongo and Nijon Frundi have been slammed for advocating federalism. At Ambazonia Calling, we agree with Honorable Paulinus Dwak, who told the Musonge Commission in no uncertain terms that all Ambazonians are possessed by the same spirit, that of freedom. Even those like Musonge who dine with the devil cannot help but be united with us. Federalism in the mouth of a Frundi or Agbonkongo is not federalism in the mouth of Farman Dongo. Federalism is code for any Ambazonian who lives in the den of Biya lions, that is the Cameroons. It is code for the restoration of independence. Given the chance to vote freely, Ambazonians to a man will pick independence over federalism by a minimum of 200% of votes that will be cast. Honorable Joa nailed it when he said that citizens of La Republique, beginning with Mr. Biya, know exactly what Ambazonians want. And federalism isn't a destination, nor is it a bus stop. Today, there is no gainsaying the fact that the form of the state is not negotiable for the Biya regime as independence is for Ambazonians. Colonialists like Laurent Esso, who said lawyers will get hungry and return to work, will wait until they grow hair on their teeth for that to happen. Yaoundé has known since 1972, when he walked the 1961 Federation to the guillotine, that it was only a matter of time for Ambazonians to be free. That time has come. Please ignore the blustering and grandstanding from the fame-seeking ignoramus at Tang and G. Paul of there is no Anglophone problem, unless you are one of those who believe that the goat can truly announce the death of the tiger. People like Atang and G are baiting the regime, hoping that Mr. Biya, like Pharaoh of Egypt, or the stubborn fly, will follow the corpse into the grave. After all, if gold can rust, they say, what will happen to iron? Manjong Jutambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Prince Akerengwe Divine, president of the Ambazonia Parents Association and a consortium member, shared a powerful message to Ambalanders this week. The main focus of Prince is a call for collaboration and coordination among leaders across the liberation movement.
We are 8 million strong. We are a powerful people if we unite and we coordinate. We must rally now. We must get the best people on board. As our AP, Dr. Sako, said one, don't fall in love with leaders, fall in line with the revolution. Because only the revolution matters. It's about recognizing competencies and leveraging our efforts in a collective, collaborative manner. We don't want to hear anything from the UN and the international community about dialogue. Dialogue what? We are being murdered. Amnesty came out with a racist report. Genocide is a crime of intention. It's not a crime of numbers. They want 1 million black people to be massacred before they call an alert.
Here once more is a reminder. Next Wednesday, June 27, the Congress of the United States will be holding a hearing on the Cameroons. The address is 45 Independence Street in Washington, D.C. Plan to attend. One of the witnesses on behalf of Ambazonia will be Effie Tembong of the Cameroon Association of Bible Translation and Literacy. Last week, we touched on the dangers of being stampeded into a dialogue, which Ambazonians must avoid, encouraging Ambazonians instead to welcome negotiations. Ambazonia Calling's Martin Ayaba reviews the many steps Ambazonians have taken in the past to beg for dialogue, and now contends that dialogue must be only with the successor of Mr. Biya, and that in any case, dialogue is ongoing now as the guns are talking.
So all this talk of dialogue now is only because true dialogue is going on, as Ambazonians have started speaking the violent and brutal language that the colonial state understands very well. They are tasting their medicine, as many of their genocidal forces are being killed and humiliated by the brave warriors of Ambaland. So true dialogue is going on now, as the guns are talking. As concerns negotiations, it is very disingenuous for anyone to talk about negotiating with a colonial regime that has treated Ambazonians like slaves conquered in a war. Many have opined that the regime is too old to negotiate with. Paul Biya, the head of the criminal colonial state, is officially 86 years old, while most of his advisors are within the same age group. On another front, the regime has shown bad faith in all its dealings with Ambazonians. It has refused to respect the flawed terms of the 1961 Federal Constitution. In a brazen move of contempt against the Ambazonian people in 1984, one of the two stars that was on the flag of Cameroon representing the two states was wiped out with just one stroke of the pen by the colonial formaster Paul Biya. The ongoing genocide and massive killings of Ambazonian citizens has left many people wondering how we came to be with these people. With the current animosity, many are those who think the only negotiations with the colonial state is for them to surrender and leave our land. Martin Ayaba, Ambazonia Calling.
No fewer than 3,000 Ambazonians have been killed by colonial forces since the end of 2016. They are all revered and greatly appreciated by all Ambazonians. They shall never die because they will always be fresh in our memories. For the only persons truly dead are those who are forgotten. In honor of every Ambazonian fallen hero, Ambazonia Calling's Innocent Chair pays tribute to their lives. In this piece, focus on the final honors to Akuma Divine, thanking every grieving Ambazonian family for their sacrifice and thanking each of our fallen heroes for their sacrifice.
Divine Fru Akuma is the first Ambazonian frontline leader who has died and has been buried in exile. He was buried in Ikom in the Cross River State in Nigeria. At the state burial, hundreds of mourners sang the Amba national anthem just before draping and lowering his casket with the amber, blue, and white striped flag. The solemn ceremony, captured on tape and shared on social media, reminded me that it is from a dead seed that a fresh plant grows. And so is the irreversible making of the conscience and consciousness of Ambazonia. 3 years ago, the idea of an Amba anthem would have been laughed off as a rare bad joke from Mr. Zebrudaya. Today, we have a generation born into the Amba anthem, proudly bearing a flag with emblems of their identity and aspirations as a free people. And yes, a free people different from those who call them brothers, but were nothing less than ravenous wolves unleashed by Feroz Biya today and Ahijo yesterday. It was difficult not to play back the anthem, and so I did.
Amazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty names in our name, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation.
I played it back to pay my last respects to Divine Akuma, co-father with Mancho BBC of the Coffin Revolution. Akuma died aged 45 of unknown causes, not that anyone rules out foul play. But I also played back the anthem because for the first time in all my life, a national anthem, other than the US Star-Spangled Banner, gave me goosebumps. That is a feeling worth dying for. Innocent Cheer, for Ambazonia Calling.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
Dear Joshua, do you remember my grandmother? Yes, I'm talking about my grandma who lives in Akona. She was on the phone with me yesterday, and she sent me some audio she wanted me to share with you. She also dictated a letter she would have wanted you to receive in her own handwriting, if only she had gone to school. First, my grandma wants you to hear the kind of music that your colonial army was blasting this week from their guns as they drove down the streets right outside our home in Akona. Joshua, Grandma wanted me to let you know that she warned you. Our people have a saying, if you intend to ride a horse, do not kick it. How exactly did you think you could mount the horse you call Ambazonia after kicking it repeatedly and so savagely? You did not listen, Joshua. You are wont to call my grandma deaf just because she's hard of hearing. But Grandma wants me to let you know that no one is as deaf as a regime that does not even listen. Grandma likes to remind you that she was out there in the streets of Akona on the 22nd of September and again on the 1st of October 2017 with a peace plant on one hand, her pipe and staff on the other hand, sending a clear message to Yaoundé that the colonial era is over. Grandma joined millions of Ambazonians across the land to celebrate the restoration of independence. Grandma wants me to let you know that she has seen it all. She was already a teenager when the brave Bakweri people joined their Banyangi, Bakosi, and Grafi brothers and sisters and more to tell Nigeria off in 1953. She was a hostess at the Mamfe conference where the British were told that they were just kicking the independence can down the road by forcing Ambazonians to either join Nigeria or La République du Cameroun. Grandma wanted me to let you know that she is proud of what Foncha, Endele, Joa, Mbile, Mukong, Fonachirimbi, and others were able to achieve when they insisted to obtain independence before joining. She was at the celebrations of independence of Ambazonia held at the Centenary Stadium in Victoria. You were still in school in France then. You were still working as a spy for the secret police and telling on every student in France who spoke ill of Amado Ahijo. Grandma also wants you to know, Joshua, that she was a cadet at Foncha's KNDP party when Ahijo visited West Cameroon. John Gould Foncha was Prime Minister then. Grandma was there and heard with her own ears as Ahijo recognized the sovereignty of Ambazonia. Ahijo may have been everything evil, but one thing he was not stupid. That is why he was never shy in any of his speeches he made from West Cameroon to point out that he had no intention of meddling in the internal affairs of West Cameroon. He recognized that there were two Cameroon nations. That is why we had laissez-passers to go from one nation to the other. That is why we had then and still have today custom checkpoints at our border crossings, both at Matazam in the northern zone and on the Tiko Douala Road. Custom checkpoints are only erected at international boundary posts, Joshua. I thought your generation learned that in school. How can you fail to recognize Ambazonia when you yourself told the world in 2009 that there is no union treaty between the two nations? What a week it has been for Grandma in Akona. Even in her old age, Grandma says she came out of retirement to join the campaign for the restoration of Ambazonia's independence. 2 weeks ago, she enrolled anew into the Takumbang wing of the resistance. They call their unit the Amazons of Ambalan. Their role is simple: feed the Amba boys, boost their morale, encourage them to be steadfast until they reach Boya. No retreat, no surrender. And bringing out the big guns as you did this week in Akona and elsewhere won't stop the march to Boya, Joshua. The only thing the music your troops were playing as they went down the street outside Grandma's house in Akona, the only thing they will do is ruin her ears. Grandma wants you to know that her life does not matter. She will rest in peace anytime you decide to take her life, and she is at peace if you kill her son and her grandson and her great-grandson as well. She's also at peace if your occupation forces, rape her daughter, rape her granddaughter, and her great-granddaughter. Whatever war crimes and atrocity you choose to commit, Joshua, nothing will stop Ambazonia's march. Ambalanders will not stop until they hoist the Ambazonian flag at the Prime Minister's lodge in Boya. Grandma says she's ready to return to her maker, Joshua. She has lived long enough to see brave Amba boys with no military training of any kind and armed with a few rocks, spears, bows and arrows, a few clubs, hunting knives, and den guns give your colonial army a run for their money. Is that all you've got by way of an army, Joshua? Grandma was tickled to see one of your soldiers wrestling with a machine gun mounted on a pickup truck that he fired and misfired at every fly in Akona. What will they do when the entire Ambazonian army, all 6 million Ambazonian people on ground zero? How will your colonial army fight when all of Ambazonia reports for garrison duty on the same day in all towns and all villages across Ambalan and raise roadblocks in their hundreds of thousands, such as the one that took your army a good 5 days to dislodge on the Boya Kumba Road? And once they were done, our boys put it right back. What shall you do, Joshua, when Boya falls, except gnash and grind your teeth and regret that you did not listen when Grand Camarade Ahijo warned you never to attack the good people of Ambazonia? From our studios here in Washington, D.C., our producer is Jeff McCoy. Our music today is from Ken Wanako, the monk from Balikumato, William Ford, an Amba staff blessed memory, Eric Matisse on the web at soundimage.org, and Prince Ajwa Alemanji of Ajam Sonic Kitron, USA. Ambazonia Calling is a joint production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. You can find us on the web at www.themissionstribune.com, www.compassfreepress.com, and www.africafreedomnetwork.com. Next Sunday is another day. Until then, keep the spirit, keep the faith, keep up the fight for justice and independence for Ambazonia. Stay Amba strong.